So hello and welcome to Seville. It's one of my favourite places to visit and I'm really excited to share this video with you. Seville has a couple of world-class attractions as well as a number of quite remarkable other places to visit. It has a wonderful old town with narrow, vehicle-less streets to get lost in. It has great bars and restaurants featuring some of the best tapas dishes I've ever eaten. It's less than 3 hours flying time from most cities in Western Europe, and, perhaps best of all, you don't need to spend very much money to have a great time there. In this video I'll go into a little more detail about all of those points, and also talk about some of the practicalities of visiting. So if that sounds good, stick around!
Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
Seville Airport is located about 6 miles northeast of the centre of town. It's the 10th busiest airport in Spain, so it's not too daunting to transit. Seville is also accessible by train. It's about 2 hours from Malaga, a journey I actually took when I left Seville, which features in this video, and it's only about 2.5 hours by high-speed train from Madrid. So if you wanted to spend a week in Spain, splitting time between Seville and another Spanish city, it's not too tricky a trip to organise. It should cost around €25 for a taxi into town, but on this occasion I took the airport bus. It costs €4 in either direction, and you can buy your ticket from a machine such as this or from the driver. It's popular, which is another way of saying it can get a bit full, but the passenger load had thinned out by the time we reached the centre of the town. I took the bus as that meant I'd have more money to spend on chorizo, but also because a lot of tourist accommodation is in the old town and so is not accessible by road. As taxis may not be able to drop you at your hotel door, taking a bus, which requires you to walk the last leg to your hotel, is not as much of an inconvenience as it is in some other destinations. If your hotel is tricky to get to, they will probably share guidance on how to get to them before you depart. If they don't, ask them. Seville does have an underground train and overground trams, but annoyingly neither connects to the airport. I stay at the Hom Sevilla. I dislike large chain hotels, many of which feel like they could be anywhere, and prefer to stay in smaller hotels which are locally owned and have some level of quirk to them. The Hom is certainly quirky, and it's very well located, close to the cathedral on the edge of the old town. It has great spacious rooms, indeed most of the rooms are apartments with small kitchens. On this occasion I stayed in one of their smallest rooms, actually an interior room with a window overlooking the reception area. It didn't have a kitchenette, but I didn't need one, and it was very comfortable and was excellent value. The Hom is not a huge property, so the reception area is only staffed for a few hours a day, but they'll help you get in and out of the property if you arrive out of hours. Seville has 2 headline attractions which are genuinely world class. The first is the Real Alcázar de Seville. An alcázar is an Iberian castle or palace built during Muslim rule of the region between the 8th and 15th centuries. The most famous alcázar is the one in Seville, which therefore tends to be referred to as the Alcázar. The site was first used as an Islamic ruler's residence in the 10th century. When this part of Spain returned to Christianity in the 14th century, it was used as the monarch's residence, hence it is known as the real Alcázar, not the fake one. Spanish speakers will of course know that Real means royal, and the complex in Seville retains that name as it is actually still a royal palace. The Spanish royal family will stay there when visiting. Its history means that the architecture is a very unusual blend of styles, with decoration that draws heavily from Islamic art. You guide yourself around the complex and can access interpretative material on your phone. The highlight is probably the Hall of Ambassadors, which is a spectacular space. Those balconies are part of the royal residence located upstairs from the older rooms of the complex on the lower level. You can pay a supplement to 2 of those rooms when the royals are not in residence, obviously. I did visit on my last trip and it is interesting, but I wouldn't say you need to see those rooms to fully enjoy your visit. An integral part of the Alcázar are the gardens, which were as important as the buildings to the rulers who occupied the palace. I'm not usually a connoisseur of gardens, but there's something about these spaces which is really relaxing and pleasant to spend time in. including, at that time of year, little baby peacocks. On my last few visits I've spent longer in the gardens than I have inside the buildings. The Alcazar is a must when in Seville, and I can attest that it bears repeat visits too. The top tip is to buy your tickets online in advance. The queues to buy tickets at the site are lengthy, and as entry numbers are capped, you may queue up and still not get in. The Alcazar is a World Heritage Site, one of 3 in Seville. The second is the other world-class attraction in the city, which is the cathedral. Again, buy tickets online in advance, and note that the entry door when you have a pre-purchased ticket is by the Giralda. The front door is for people without tickets, and again you can end up queuing for a long time if you don't buy a ticket in advance. Seville Cathedral is the 4th largest church in the world, only beaten by St. Peter's in the Vatican, the Basilica of Our Lady of Aparecida in Brazil, no, I've never heard of it either, and Milan Cathedral. It's 50% larger than St. Paul's in London and is also the largest Gothic church in the world, so it's a really, really big church. Probably the most famous feature within the church is the grave of Christopher Columbus. His remains are actually held in a catafalque, which is your new word of the day. He's being borne by the kings of Castile, Leon, Aragon and Navarre, in case you were wondering. These days his contribution to history is not exactly controversy-free, and it's not exactly clear as to how much of his body is in the grave. He was interred in Valladolid, the Dominican Republic and Cuba before ending up in Seville, and bits of his body may have been left behind in those various locations, but it is undoubtedly a site of historical significance. I mentioned the Giralda earlier, which is the bell tower of the cathedral. Originally a minaret for the mosque on the site, it was built in 1198 and stands largely unchanged since it was built 800 years ago. It's 100 metres tall, and you might not fancy climbing all those stairs to get to the top, but apart from a very short run of stairs right at the top, you climb it via a series of spiral ramps. At the top are some pretty spectacular views of the city. It might look daunting, but the ramps mean it's not that difficult to climb. Challenging for anyone if it's really, really hot, as it often is in Seville, but I'd say that if you take your time, it is accessible for most people. Also at the top are some pretty spectacular bells. I timed my climb well to avoid being up there when they rang, but I didn't on my last visit, and they are really quite deafening, so be warned. I'm not, generally speaking, a big fan of churches, but Seville's cathedral is really quite special and is something you must see when visiting the city. The third World Heritage Site is close by and is one of Seville's lesser attractions, the Archive of the Indies. An impressive building first occupied in 1598, it holds the records of Spain's colonial adventures, which once again represents a period of history not without controversy. A limited number of documents are on permanent display, but there's been a temporary exhibition of unrelated topics whenever I visited. Photos of bullfighting on this occasion. Free entry, so there's little to lose from popping in. The final significant attraction is all a bit odd. It's the Plaza de Espana. It was completed in 1928 for the following year's Ibero-American Exposition, which was a kind of Spanish-speaking World's Fair. Each of Spain's provinces is represented by a tiled alcove, and there's a moat, and when I visited, a stage had been erected on the central concourse as part of the annual Seville Arts Festival. It's a bit odd as it doesn't really now serve a purpose. The interior of the building is used as offices for various local and government departments rather than having any touristic purpose. It feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, as it could have housed restaurants or museums or something to make a visit there feel more worthwhile. There's a fairly constant programme of buskers outside and a number of street traders, and it's extremely pleasant to stroll around the complex and the surrounding gardens. It's impressive, but it feels like there should be more to it. While we're here, a trip to and around the Plaza de Espana in a horse-drawn carriage is the last really touristy opportunity I want to mention. These congregate outside the cathedral. The smell and the byproducts of the horses don't exactly enhance the ambience of the area, but they are photogenic and the horses look to be well cared for, so it may be an option for you. It wasn't an option for me, but I understand that €45 will get you an hour's trip. There's also a river, some parks, shopping areas and some museums, as you would expect of any major tourist destination. Seville is also the capital of Andalusia, a region famous for flamenco. There are a number of venues where you can see performances, often in small, hot, crowded rooms, all of which adds to the authenticity of the performances. But the biggest attraction for me is the Old Town, a network of narrow, winding streets filled with bars, shops and restaurants. A place to stroll aimlessly, seeking refreshment as required, which brings me on to food. Andalusia is widely believed to be the home of tapas, and it is widely offered in bars and restaurants around the city. For around €4 you can get a small portion of something delicious. A small portion, but not that small a portion. I found that 3 tapas was an ample amount for dinner, and I'm a fairly big eater. If you're travelling alone, I think tapas is an ideal dining option, as it allows you to experience multiple dishes within a single meal. I can't remember ever being served a bad dish of tapas in Seville. And a half litre of beer costs between €3 and €5, depending on where you go. I tended not to go back to the places that charged me €5. Seville is a great place to visit as a tourist, with plenty of attractions to fill a long weekend or even a week. But I love the city as it's just a nice place to be. If you revisit the city and don't revisit the attractions, the weather and the scenery make it a delightful place to just hang out. This was my 3rd visit, and I still found plenty of new alleys to stroll down, new bars to try and exciting new restaurants to visit. I've mentioned the weather a few times. Seville is believed to be the warmest city in Europe, and it can quite regularly reach 40 degrees Celsius in the summer, something to bear in mind if planning a trip for July or August. My last visit was in January, and I was able to sit outside in the evening quite comfortably in just a sweater, and it was warm and sunny during the day. Seville is also a good place for exploring the region. The cities of Jerez, Córdoba and Cádiz are all in close range and can be easily visited as a day trip using the excellent rail network. So there you go, my guide to Seville. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and leave me a comment. Have you been? Would you consider it after watching this video? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, I have a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.